Seasonal affective disorder is a mental health condition where people will get depressive symptoms, but only at certain times of the year. Most commonly, it will happen in the wintertime, especially in northern climates. It can have significant impacts on people as well as their loved ones. So let's talk about it. Hey everybody, it's Dr. David. We talk about vitamin D and sunlight. We talk about mental health issues. I've certainly put those two concepts of vitamin D and mental health into the same sentence and before, and of course the same videos. But today we're going to talk about something very specific, which is called seasonal affective disorder, which some people will call the winter blues. And this is a form of depression. But unlike typical major depression, it only happens in a seasonal pattern. And while it sometimes could happen in the summertime, I guess, especially in Florida, sometimes it's so hot people don't get outside at all during the summertime, but can do so in the wintertime. But most of the time, we're talking about places up north in the northern climates where, especially as we get to the winter time, the days get shorter, the amount of sunlight is shorter, it's cold to get outside. Unlike here in Florida, you may get outside, but you may be in a t-shirt. But up north, often there will be people wearing sweatshirts and flannels and ski suit and ski jackets and stuff. So not having much sun, vitamin D producing exposure to them. And that seems to be a big part of what is happening in people who get this condition. Okay, now, but there's a couple things to really unpack about this. And the first is understanding the role of serotonin. Okay, now serotonin is sometimes referred to as the feel-good hormone. It's what makes people feel happy, what feels make people feel content. Okay, when people take medications, such as like a serotonin reuptake inhibitors or SSRIs like Zoloft, Prozac, etc. The job of that medicine is to slow down the reuptake of serotonin, therefore leaving the serotonin within the space, the synapse between those cells for a longer period of time. Okay. Now there are also other things like such as theanine, which is an amino acid which says make more and put more serotonin into that synapse, or things like 5-hydroxytryptophan, which are which is the building block for serotonin. And so there are those types of therapeutic options. There are specific types of dosing. One should work with a knowledgeable healthcare provider about that. But understanding that there's lots of different ways to improve serotonin, and we're going to talk about some lifestyle things as well. But serotonin itself, again, it needs to be released, and then there is a serotonin receptor on the other side. So this is one nerve, this is another nerve. It puts the serotonin out there, and then it's supposed to suck it back up like this. But while it's in here, it kind of tingles over here and sends the message that way. And so, again, the serotonin reuptake inhibitor slows it in the reuptake, and then the other things are just putting more out there. Okay. Very high-tech graphics there from Dr. David today, right? Okay, so but serotonin itself, besides having those building blocks tended to in terms of the 5-HTP and the theanine for releasing it, also healthy diets, getting good exercise, and having good sleep all play a role in having optimal serotonin levels. And of course, we're going to talk in a little bit about how we can optimize those things as well. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about vitamin D, because we can't go too long to one of my videos without talking about vitamin D. But vitamin D is it's based upon cholesterol. It's a molecule that's based upon cholesterol. There goes through some changes throughout the body and then the kidneys. But when sunlight hits the skin, through the blood vessels, that actually changes the vitamin D to the active form, 25-hydroxy vitamin D. Okay, and you need the active form, and therefore, again, if the sunlight is not getting to the skin because there's layers upon layers of clothing, or you're not going outside in the first place, your body cannot make naturally the vitamin D. Okay, and what vitamin D does in particular for serotonin is it activates the enzyme that starts the production of serotonin. Okay, so can't get past first base, can't even get to first base if you don't have the sunlight there in terms of making it on your own. Okay, in addition to that, it's very clearly understood. Low vitamin D levels are associated with with depression, all types of depression. It's associated with lots of other mood conditions as well, but certainly it's a thing. One of the things we check for in our clinic all the time, we want to make sure that vitamin D levels are in the middle part of range. Range being between 30 to 100, so in that 65, 70-ish range for people who have the mental health types of issues can be very, very helpful in getting somebody up there. Okay, but of course, if you're not able to get it through the sunlight, get it through a supplement. And it's through vitamin D3, not vitamin D2. And if you're going to check the blood level, it's not the 1, 25 hydroxy vitamin D. It's 25 hydroxy vitamin D. So let's make sure we're testing properly and make sure we're taking the right form, the optimal form of vitamin D if we're going through the whole effort of trying to get it right. Okay. Now, also, any adult can safely take 5,000 units of vitamin D3, unless they have some kind of like major liver problem or something like that, then maybe they can't process it. But it's a common dose that people can get. So I would say, optimally, you check your level, you get it right. Okay. I think I've shared before, it's taken me up to 15, it took me 15,000 units to get my levels up there. And I never had problems with depression, but that's when my allergies and asthma disappeared. Okay. So again, there's something to do, but check the level. And if you're going to be on it for after 3 months, check the level at that point and see what you've accomplished. Okay. Now let's talk about melatonin. Okay. So melatonin, we all know about, is the sleep hormone. Okay. And it's made in the pineal gland, as part of our brain. And that's where it is released. And it is released as due to darkness. So when it's dark out, and the reason why we tell people when you want to get good sleep, make it really dark in your house, in your room. Okay. Don't be exposing yourself to bright light in the hour trying to go to sleep, because you want to get that melatonin turned on. Okay. But it's supposed to go up at night and it's supposed to come down during the daytime. Now, why is this important now? Because during the shortened days of the wintertime and more darkness, more melatonin can be produced. But during the daytime, if your melatonin levels up, that can bring fatigueness, that can bring tiredness, that can also obviously contribute. If you're feeling weak and tired all the time, that can certainly make a person feel more depressed also. But the cyclical production of melatonin, up during the night, down during the day, that's a very important pattern that we can be exposing ourselves to. And really, really need to establish that. So you could almost think of a way of melatonin being the opposite of the serotonin, in a way that it can bring worsening problems. So we want to get the melatonin patterning correctly. Okay. But there are some things that you can do when you wake up. Get outside, get exposed to first morning light. Okay, at least open the window, but expose yourself to first morning light within the first 5 minutes of waking up. That should immediately bring it down. Also, it makes cortisol go up, and cortisol going up is one of the things that can make us feel better. Okay, so it's almost like an antidepressant. And then typically what happens is our cortisol level then starts to come down gradually as the day goes into nighttime, and as the melatonin would then be starting to pick up as the day goes on too. So kind of like they're seesawing in a way, and that's an important pattern, because those are the two main hormones in our body that do go up and down relative to day versus night. All the other hormones in our body, obviously females is based upon times of a month, but thyroid hormones and other testosterones and things like that, that certainly obviously it has more of a steady state type of thing. Okay. Now, sun lamps can be useful in terms of not just because again, that's the sunlight exposing your eyes to it. So again, being exposed to a sun lamp for about 10 minutes first thing in the morning can also help with those types of cycles. Okay. Now let's talk about food. Okay. Now the food choices that we make also can play a difference. Ultra processed foods, those that have foods that have high amounts of added sugar. And we've talked about before, not just that it has sugar or carbs. Okay. Fruit has sugar in it. Juices would be considered added sugar. So, it's not just added table sugar, but honey, syrups, those are all considered added sugars, as well as adding table sugar to something like that, but not a carb per se. But the ultra processed foods and the added sugars, they also have been shown to increase the likelihood of depression. Okay. Now, of course, during the holiday season, so hopefully by next week, people, even if we haven't been eating so great over the past couple of weeks, we have a resolution ahead of us to eat better. So as we get into January into February, especially when those are the really when if you've been vitamin D, you don't lose your vitamin D immediately because you weren't exposed to sun for a few days or a supplement for a few days. But if starting in November, you started really cutting down on your vitamin D, a couple months later, that's when you're going to feel it. So this is also the time to get up, and so forth. Want to have to expose yourself there, but that's an issue. But anti-inflammatory diets, okay, which is a lot of the things that we've talked about, not just the added sugars, whole foods. As far as ultra processed foods, typically if there's a lot of ingredients that you can't pronounce on the ingredient list, that pretty much lets you know that it's in an ultra processed food. But also just again anti-inflammatory. So like focusing on just whole foods, high fiber foods, fermented foods. Okay. Now, if a person does have candida issues, you want to get that under control first. But fermented foods like the kefirs, the kombuchas, probiotic yogurts. Not all yogurts have probiotic. They may just have active cultures that are yogurt cultures, but probiotic cultures are what feeds the microbiome. Prebiotic foods, things like Jerusalem artichoke and a lot of fiber help feed those good bacteria, which the gut-brain connection. There's your what you eat, not just what you are in terms of nutrition, but in terms of our mental health as well. Consuming produce that are all the foods of the that have all the colors in the rainbow. So between our fruits and vegetables, you can get almost every color out of there. So that's really important because each color has its own different types of nutrients as well, which is important. And of course, eating a good amount of fish, low mercury fish. We've talked about how salmon is always the best, especially if it's wild Alaskan salmon. Sardines and anchovies. The smaller on the food chain, the less mercury, because the bigger the animal, typically the more mercury ate by smaller fish, and the eating smaller figure bigger up the chain line. So it kind of becomes a cumulative thing. Now, in terms of nutrients, depression can also be lessened by intake of other nutrients as well. B vitamins can be very, very helpful. Of course, if you don't know your methylation status, your MTHFR for activating folate, MTRR for activating B12, it's a really good idea to get a methylation panel like the MaxGen panel done. So if you're going to be taking B vitamins, you're making sure you're taking the proper form that your body will optimally use. Okay. And there also should be good intake of magnesium, of iron, zinc, and vitamin C. Okay. So basic stuff, certainly if you've been following this channel, there's nothing revolutionary here, but I did want to put it out there because as we have the opportunity in the next couple months across the country to be having this problem, and maybe if we can prevent it, that would be a wonderful thing. So for all of you who are watching this, who are in especially the colder, more dreary climates, again, really, I hope these are good tips for you that'll help you along. And of course, everybody, I hope you've had a wonderful holiday season, and please have a happy and a healthy new year. Have a good day.